pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, roll call.
Mayor Kramer is absent. Councilmember Ortiz is absent. Councilmember Mackin.
Present.
Councilmember Pierce.
Here.
Councilmember Knapp.
Here.
Councilmember Beckwith.
Here.
Councilmember Petzger.
Here.
Councilmember Couts.
Here.
And Mayor Pro Tem Hazelbaker.
Here. I would entertain a motion to excuse Mayor Tom Kramer and Cisco Ortiz.
Motion to excuse.
Second. Motion and support. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Same for opposed. Motion is carried. We are up to public comments. If there is anyone who would like to step up to the podium, give your name and address, you can do that now, or there's a time at the end of the meeting to do so also. Seeing none, we are up to the consent agenda. Items 1 through 4, the items listed in the consent agenda are considered to be routine by the City Council and the City Manager and will be enacted in one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless requested by a council member or a citizen. In this event, the item will be removed from the consent agenda and council action will be taken separately on said item. Those items so approved under the heading consent agenda will appear in the council minutes in their proper form. First, we have the City Council meeting from February 25th, 2019. The Recreation Board regular minutes of January 9th, 2019. City of Coldwater monthly financial report for January 2019. And a letter from Janice Murphy, the Manager Secretary from the Branch County Fair, requesting permission to hold the annual Branch County Fair Parade on Saturday, August 3rd, 2019. Does anyone want to remove any items from the consent agenda? From the public? Anything up here? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved, Your Honor. Support.
Motion with support. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Consent agenda is passed. We are now up to bills and accounts. Any questions on the bills and accounts? Tom Eldridge is here. He knows all the bills and all the accounts. If there are no questions, I would entertain a motion to pay the bills.
Motion to pay the bills.
Support. Motion with support. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion passes. The City Manager's report. Keith.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good evening, Council and everyone. First and foremost, an important date coming up is the setting of Saturday, June 22nd as the date in which we've set for Strawberry Fest. As noted and as covered in the media, that not knowing at which whether or not that would move forward at the time that the calendar was prepared, we didn't identify it within the calendar, and have since now, having taken over the festivals and events, have set June 22nd, 2019 as the date for this year's Strawberry Fest. Secondly, wanted to make note that we did receive the funds for the Fire Assistance Program, the federal program that is covering nearly $194,000 in grant funds for the purchase of self-contained breathing apparatus for the Coldwater Fire Department. And so we're anticipating that that will be delivered here shortly. Next up was a large item pickup. This is the first week in which we moved the date of large item pickup from Monday to Thursday. That was done at the request of Republic Services, our waste hauler, but we also feel as though that it will be a beneficial move and hopefully provide some additional better service when that is collected. And it gives then residents up to the prior Wednesday to call for a pickup on Thursday. So there's a shorter time in between where previously you had to call on Friday to get picked up on Monday. So this will be the first week for that, and we'll report back if we have any issues, but we're looking forward to better service by having it picked up on Thursday. Today was the first day of the Board of Review, and you've got 2 more opportunities. Residents have 2 more opportunities in which to schedule appointments or to stop in both tomorrow, Tuesday, March 12th, and Wednesday, March 13th, to file their appeals, and they can do so through the City Assessor's Office. We want to highlight the fact that members of the Coldwater Police Department and Coldwater Fire Department are participating in the annual Real Men Read program at Jefferson Elementary School. This is designed to help young boys who read with less confidence or ability become stronger readers. And we have about 10 employees that are going to be participating in that program, so we appreciate their participation in that through the course of this month. We also wanted to acknowledge the city received a donation from Leg Lumber to help us build confined space entry training props for the Coldwater Fire Department. So we wanted to acknowledge that donation, and we appreciate their support. And then lastly, we wanted to make note that we took receipt of the new Kubota utility vehicle, which you have pictured there, that replaced a similar piece of equipment that was 13, 14 years old, and that is utilized out at the cemetery on a daily basis, and then during winter downtown as well. That's all I have for you this morning. This afternoon.
Seems like morning. Any questions for Keith?
Keith went on the large item pickup. It used to be with the Friday calls, Monday pickup. Excuse me. They couldn't put their item on, I think, until Sunday afternoons. And so now, you know what it is?
So they're still asked to not put it out till Wednesday for a Thursday pickup. And in the event that there is a weather delay or a mechanical problem, we would pick it up on Friday or even on Saturday.
Thank you.
Anything else for Keith? I'd entertain a motion to accept the city manager's report.
Motion to accept.
Support.
Motion with support. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carries. We're up to number 7, letter from Megan Angel, city attorney, regarding updating local election law. Consider adoption of ordinance number 819. Megan?
Thank you. In part, this was previously acted upon by you at the last council meeting, where you used the resolution procedure that's allowed by the state to move the deadline for filing nominating petitions from the 12th Tuesday before the August primary back to the 15th Tuesday before the August primary. But because the resolution does not get codified in our local ordinances, we thought it was wise to also pass an ordinance that will place that deadline change in our book of ordinances so that people will know when they look at our ordinances, they'll get the correct information. And this ordinance will also make express what is directed in the city charter, that where there are 2 or fewer candidates for a single office, we do not have to hold a primary election in August. Their 2 names just end up on the November ballot. This was introduced at the last meeting, and if you are so inclined, you may act on this ordinance tonight. Questions?
Did we, I think I was going to bring up something about the 2 or fewer.
It was in my letter. My letter
That's right.
before that introduced the material to you last time contained an error, probably an editing error. I probably wrote it one way, and then when I went back and changed it, I didn't change that part. This letter lines up correctly with this ordinance.
And ultimately, it brings us into compliance with state law.
Any other questions? I'd entertain a motion to adopt or not adopt ordinance number 819.
Motion to adopt ordinance number 819.
Support.
Motion with support. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carried. Number 8, letter from Megan Angel, city attorney, seeking approval of the Uniform Video Service local franchise agreement for Skitter TV Consider adoption of resolution number 19-18 and approval of agreement number A19-03. Megan.
As previously, the Coldwater Board of Public Utilities held a video franchise agreement with the city of Coldwater, went back a number of years. Now that the Coldwater Board of Public Utilities is no longer the cable provider, and Skidder TV is the cable provider, Skidder needs to enter into a franchise agreement with the city to be allowed to run its programming through the cables in the streets. And this agreement is propounded by the Public Service Commission, which was required to do so by a law that was passed in 2007. I think that law was passed for the purpose of making the cable companies' interactions with local government uniform. Everything was going to be the same everywhere, and so we ended up with this agreement. There isn't much that we can do with this agreement under the law. I reviewed it and concluded that it's complete, and that's really the extent of our review. I also inserted that we would have them collect or pay to us 5% of their gross revenue, which is the amount, the maximum amount, and it's the same amount that we charge other video service providers in this community. And I didn't put anything in the public access portion of the agreement because we don't have channels, and we have to have channels in order to collect money from them for those. So that's what this is.
Those funds go.
The funds go to the city.
General fund, yeah.
General.
Questions for Megan? I entertain a motion to adopt or not adopt the resolution 19-18 and approve the agreement or not approve the agreement A19-03.
Just one question. Prior to the agreement, were we not getting that 5% until now?
We have been getting that 5%.
Even though we didn't have an agreement, we were still getting the 5%.
Yes.
From the city or from the BPU?
From the revenue from Skidder. From the Skidder billings.
What was you asking?
So it's prior to the agreement, no, prior, because we've had Skidder for the last 6 to 8 months, but no agreement's been approved, so are we getting that 5% now?
We've always made the payments, sorry to interrupt, but yeah, we've always been making the payments right along.
Move to approve the agreement, A19-03. Support.
Motion with support. Any discussion? Questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion is passed. Number 9, letter from Keith Baker, City Manager, regarding MDOT contract number 19-5070 for road improvement project on South Jefferson Street between US 12 South to Park Street. Consider adoption of resolution number 19-16. Keith?
Thank you, Your Honor. This will be, the 3rd year in a row that you will have seen a similar contract. This is for the contract of the reconstruction of South Jefferson Street. For the city to be able to receive $375,000 or up to $375,000 in federal funds through the Michigan Department of Transportation. In doing so, we would have approximately 50% match for the construction of street, sidewalk, curb, gutter, and storm sewer. And then we have 100% cost allocation for the water and sanitary sewer. No portion of that gets covered by federal or state funds. So this is the next step in which this is the contract that we would enter into with MDOT for those grant funds for the construction project, which is now anticipated to be led at the beginning of April with the summer construction. So to proceed with that, we would need you to consider Resolution 1916 to approve the contract, which would continue the process forward for the reconstruction of South Jefferson Street.
Questions for Keith?
So we've got planned and budgeted for it or not?
Correct. Both from the city side as well as the BPU side for the utilities. It will be similar in scope and nature to the Grand Street project and Church Street 2 summers ago. If you can imagine the the nature of the work that took place. It's full reconstruction for the most part, utilities and curb cutter sidewalk.
Other questions for Keith?
If we approve this, what's the timetable?
It's still subject to the contractor, but we've laid out, we're hoping to be after the car cruise in May and before the fair in August. There's enough construction days in which to meet that timetable if weather dependent.
Good luck this year.
Any other questions for Keith? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to either adopt or not adopt resolution number 19-16.
Motion.
I'll give the trades. Motion to adopt resolution 1916.
Support.
Motion with support. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion is carried. We're up to number 10, where we get a presentation of the 2018 Annual Police Department Report by Mark Bartel, Public Safety Director, in his last report.
Good evening, Council. Thanks for having me. I'll take a minute before I start to wish the Coldwater girls good luck tonight. Their game should be in progress right now. And if anybody gets an update, let me know. I hope you had a chance to read through our annual report. It's really quite long. And yet I find myself having to edit it quite a bit because I can't include everything I'd like to and still make it readable. But I have to start out any annual report about the police department with a special thank you to the people who really make the police department work, and that's the citizens of Coldwater. There's an old adage in police work that you can't be successful unless you're part of your community. And the community, the police department can't be successful without the people. The people can't be successful without the police. And it's a community reporting and policing is totally dependent upon the collaboration of citizens. And so I consider ourselves in really good shape in Coldwater. We have citizens help us every day, and the number one thing they do is take care of themselves successfully. They don't require our assistance, and that's a big thing for us. But when they do require our assistance, I find they are very cooperative, very helpful. A little bit of caveat there, it's not always successful. But most citizens take pride in taking care of their community, and that's a real plus for us as a police department. So instead of going over the entire police department, I've decided to highlight a few key points. And on the first page that I highlighted, I want to talk about our reserve officer unit. Reserve officer units staffed between 10 and 11 persons. They're civilian part-time employees that provided specialized training to assist the full-time sworn staff. Keep in mind that these civilians do not have the authority for arrest. They're civilians and they're not sworn in as a full-time officer. But that's the key, because they're civilians, yet they spend their time with us. And so if you look down in that report, you'll see that they contributed 2,168 hours last year. Can you imagine if we tried to fund that with full-time staff? It's impossible. And it really is a volunteer effort in this respect. We do pay our reserve officers minimum wage. And it's designed not to cover their time, but to cover their trouble. Gasoline, that sort of thing. Keep in mind, they attend monthly meetings. They follow a very unusual schedule. Oftentimes they're working from 8 o'clock at night to 4 in the morning. They go through a number of specialized trainings where they come in on their days off from their normal work. They have to appear in court. They get a lot of subpoenas, or they have to get their boss, give them some time off, come down, go to court, and get paid a rather minimal fee for spending sometimes 2 to 3 hours at the court thing. And then you've seen them at all our events. I think I used 8 of them during the fireworks. And it's just, quite frankly, be impossible to do a good job without their service. And so I'd like to say thank you to them. The next page I wanted to cover was Branch County 911 Communications. I've been on that board for a number of years and recently served as its chair. And we had a milestone this year in the sense that the board went on to start the implementation of an 800 megahertz radio system as recommended by our communications data consultant firm. We're also doing additional data delivery through fiber optics and other options presented by technology. People don't realize that the officers have radios that they carry every day, just like this portable radio here, and the ones in their cars. In addition to that, they have data delivery into their cars through the computer systems that we recently replaced. What I want you to understand about this is that we have to stay active in that group. That group is made up of all the users in the community, all the agencies, the townships, the county branch. We're all in this as a partnership, and it's important because at the day in, day out, the lifeline between trouble and assistance for citizens and police officers alike, and firefighters, is 911. That's the hub. That's where we get all things go through there. And so I want to stress, in my opinion, we need to continue that strong relationship. As with me leaving, Chief Smaltz has been gracious enough to accept a position on our board, 911 board, and he was promptly voted chairman. And I thank him for that. And so I know we're in good hands. He's going to be very proactive, and that's just what we need. The next thing I wanted to cover was community health. You know, we've always been involved with the hospital, but when ProMedica took over, we took some extra time, spent some time with those folks, and started talking about our interaction with them. Not only as far as safety goes, and safety planning for their organization, but to talk about how we can interact, and oftentimes our services are required at the hospital. So they call us down there a lot. And I think they have to look at ER. The emergency room becomes another spot where we meet victims, and that we take people that are injured, and we take folks that are in need of assistance or through mental health screening. And that becomes real important that we have that relationship because it's a very complicated system. It's not uncommon for a state police to bring someone into ER, and then we spend time go down to assist them. So it's not just the customers that we serve, but also all the other agencies compound that with because they're located in town. Well, it's a double-edged sword because we love it that they're located in town. And as a sidebar, I've always told my new officers, you want to be friends with two people when you come to work here: the nurses at ER and the payroll department. But they'll both save your life at some point in time. The needs of persons that have need mental health services, either by direction of statute or the court, is very high. And the number of those types of calls for us have increased and become oftentimes very difficult, especially if the person is violent in nature. So it takes that specialized assistance. Matter of fact, a number of years ago, ER remodeled a treatment room specifically that was what we call clean, not a lot of stuff in it, smooth edges, a place where we could, a single officer could maintain custody of a prisoner, yet not have to worry about that prisoner interfering with the operations in ER. It was a good collaborative effort. And then, along with ProMedica comes the psychiatric unit at the hospital. And I recently talked to a friend of mine who works in the UP. And oftentimes, if they have someone in need of mental health treatment, they drive 8 hours, 4 hours over, to drop someone off and 4 hours back. And we're talking about 4 minutes here. So it's a real big plus for us. So we want to continue to keep our relationship with the hospital strong. The next thing I want to highlight that we did last year was partnership up with, we've been partners with the school systems for years, but with Coldwater District brought in the ALICE program. And ALICE is an acronym for Alert, Lockdown, Inform, Counter, and Evacuate. It's basically a version of what we've been teaching in the lockdown procedure for the last 20 years, which is run, hide, and fight. It's what we teach our students and our staff on how to protect themselves should someone with a weapon come into school. Quite frankly, it's a sad comment on our society that we have to teach this, but it's real and it's here to stay, and we have to be proactive in that tracking of those trainings. So, in collaboration with the school, we sent 2 of our staff to that ALICE training too to become instructors. And so we can go and interact with schools and know exactly what they're training and how to process through that with them. And that's been a good thing. And there's a variety of programs. The nice thing about a contractor training like that is they track, that company then tracks all the training and make sure every school employee gets that training and keeps records of that. And it's a lot more uniform that way. The next big step that we're facing with the schools is the, recently we started the Branch County School Safety Task Force, or I said restarted. We started about 25 years ago, and every 3 to 4 years we re-up that commitment. Well, the state of Michigan, if you don't know, started a state of Michigan School Safety Task Force. They just put out their recommendations. I think there's 24 of them. The sad part is none of them involve any money yet. They say they're going to support it with grant applications, and hopefully they do. But I got to take a step back. They provided some grant money last year, but by the time we heard about the grant, the window to apply for it was like 2 weeks. And it's the school is going to have to go after the grant. But hopefully next year they can look at those requirements and get in on that grant money. And hopefully we can then support our local task force to ensure that we're doing everything. And this is all inclusive. It goes clear back to prevention, all the way through hardening our targets, to follow up post-incident. And it's a long report. It took quite a while to read through it, let alone understand it. But what I want you to keep in mind is that collaboration with the schools is ongoing and very strong. I want to talk a little bit about substance abuse. It's kind of ever present in our minds. You'll notice in our report, we went through and identified the number of cases that we have and how many for each type of drug. And also make note in the report that we this is mentioned twice in the report that we administered Narcan for overdose. And I think a couple of years ago, I read an article in the paper where they had identified 247 times that we administered Narcan in Branch County. And boy, that's a bunch. The reason I bring up substance abuse is our changing laws. Where marijuana, recreational marijuana is going to change our system, and in the future you'll see fewer possession type transactions or type calls in our annual report. That part will go down in the traditional sense, but other things will go up. Process violations, basically how do we administer recreational marijuana, will go up. Driving violations I think will go up dramatically. Domestic violence and disorderly crimes will all go on the increase. That's my prediction, and Robert, my predecessor, can fill you in on how well I did with that prediction. If you notice the very next page, I looked at our annual statistics, and we had 160 narcotics law violations last year and 27 operating while impaired. I think narcotics are going to go down, And in general, OWI, operating while impaired, is going to go up, although you must understand that it's going to be extremely hard to investigate. Operating while impaired under alcohol, since 2013 to 2017, an average of 10,000 deaths per year in the United States related to drunk driving. I just don't think we can continue to live with that. I think we have to continue to strive for enforcement of education in that area. So if we're not okay with that, you now have to add marijuana to that impaired situation and understand that investigating driving impaired to drugs is way harder than alcohol. Because alcohol, you have a presumptive test. It's called a preliminary breath test and a final breath test at the jail. Marijuana has no presumptive test. So you have to determine that out on the side of the road who's impaired and who's not. So you take different types of investigative techniques. So along with that substance abuse, I also included a page on our training. And right at the top is A-Ride, Advanced Roadside Impaired Driving Enforcement. And that's a 3-day school, and we're sending someone to be an instructor in that training. And that training will help the officers understand what factors would identify for the court if a person's impaired under the influence of marijuana or narcotics. So as we progress, we're going to deal with this. Marijuana, when I came through high school, marijuana was literally ditch weed, they called it. And now it's highly sophisticated, very strong, completely different from acceptance. Although I suggest that many of my cohorts pass the law, so maybe they don't realize the difference. Maybe they will. I do want to look on that training sheet, the type of stuff that we use to deal with substance abuse. Crisis intervention, dealing with mentally ill persons, de-escalation, drug-free communities, drug trend safety and packaging. These are all names of trainings that we went to. Leading and managing drug task force, Narcan training, responding to suicidal suspects, standard field sobriety testing, standard field sobriety testing refreshers, and suicide prevention. They're all tied in. And someday I think we probably need to go through and identify every single complaint that we take and see if it's related to any kind of substance abuse. And if I looked at the numbers that we send up for prosecution, at least half. Now, most of this stuff's been informational, but I'm going to touch on what I call a somber note in my notes. Under equipment, we've had tourniquets in our training, in our possession for a number of years now, but last year I changed our policy and I now require an officer to carry a tourniquet on their person, added to their belt or their pocket. The studies have shown that when an officer needs a tourniquet, he can't go back to his car to get it. He has to administer it, oftentimes be able to administer it to himself. It's called self-aid and buddy aid. And the idea, that's another comment on our society, that we now require our police officers, in addition to their other safety equipment, to carry a tourniquet on. So you can imagine how that might make your family members feel. So I'll move on from that on. This next one's a pretty big deal for us this year, and that's in the area of data storage. 6 patrol units are equipped with new watchguard in-car video systems, and then all our patrol cars are equipped with new computers. And in the annual report, you saw Lieutenant Beeman, nice enough to take a picture of those two things together, and you see that computer and that little video screen up there, and you understand that's just the tip of the iceberg. The amount of time and effort that went into putting those systems in is unbelievable. And you may remember that we expended about $90,000 to do so. And so it was a really collaborative work of Lieutenant Beeman, Deputy Director Scheid, a number of the other officers, our IT department, Pat Poole, and Craig Figueroa, and Josh Smith, and Dave's department helped us with all the installation. of many of the parts and pieces, and it's taken us several months to finally get them all in and operating, but they're great. You understand that half the traffic that used to go over the radio now comes over the computer, and it's outlined. And I'll give you, for instance, on our computer-aided dispatch. One of the officers goes to a call, and a call history will appear, and tell them that we've been to that house 6 times for domestic violence in the past year. So that gives that officer some level of understanding of what they might be walking into. Another thing that would come up is a big red alert that there's somebody wanted that's been reported through that initial call. And so the officer will know that they're coming into a situation where somebody has a warrant for them. So stuff like that comes through that computer and allows that officer to be better prepared once they arrive. And then the in-car videos, I go back to substance abuse, and one of the major forms of evidence that we have in OWI enforcement is the video from our cars. And the audio portion of those units allow us to tape many of our suspect interviews, no matter where they're at. If they're out on the road, in the house. We got pretty good coverage distance. We can't always, doesn't always work, half a mile away, but most of the time we're able to do that. So if you can manage it, reach over and give yourself a big pat on the back, because this doesn't happen without your support, without counsel on behalf of the citizens saying, we're going to commit some money to these 2 things. They're really big project for us, and I was very, very glad to get it completed, so thank you.
The officers have also mentioned that the improvement in the video quality has helped during enforcement and prosecutions.
Well, we went to HD.
Yeah.
And so, a side note to that, a lot of people won't realize this. Oftentimes a camera can see better than a human eye. And when that occurs, sometimes we'll see a video on the web and say, geez, didn't the officer see that? And sometimes they don't. Sometimes the HD camera can pick up something an officer didn't see at the time. So in retrospect, when we go back and review those, we might see a piece of evidence where something was thrown out of the car or something was thrown on the ground because the camera lets us review that. So it's really good stuff. So I'd like to close tonight with talking about people. I started out talking about the citizens, now I'd like to talk about your employees. And the effort they produce, the ethics they follow, the dedication to the department, the compassion they offer to victims, the skill in which they complete their profession, the humor that's oftentimes needed to get through the job, the desire to assist, and the desire to be a part of the team is what makes your employees at the police department and public safety agency really special. So I'd like to take a minute to thank them for their effort, and thank you guys once again for your support. So, any questions?
I have a question about school lockdowns. Is there a system in place yet to notify other schools if the school nearby is in a lockdown? So if the high school is locked down, how does the middle school or Max Larson know about that?
There currently is no methodology to provide a citywide notification of a lockdown, or even a school-wide notification of a lockdown. The process, obviously, is one of the main topics that we have involved in our task force conversation. Because the state has now come out with what's a universal list of what lockdown means, because it's different for everybody. You can have a straight-up lockdown. There's an intruder on campus with a weapon. I mean, it's literally lock the doors, hide in the corners, escape if you can, run, hide, fight if you have to. And that's different than there's the police are chasing a wanted subject through the neighborhood. And the school might just lock its front door and let it continue normal operations with the students, okay? There's some people call them soft lockdowns. Well, in order to make this work, we had to standardize those descriptions And then you have to set up some sort of email, preferably, methodology or phone tree that would then go out and when that can go out. So imagine if you're an officer, you get a call, and you're now chasing a guy through a neighborhood, and you know you're going to go run by Jefferson School. If you get a chance, you're hopefully saying to the dispatcher, or hopefully the dispatcher's already figured out, I think I'm going to call Jefferson School. Okay? And now, would that require a notice for the high school? Probably not. But unless the guy can really run fast. So you have to look at the divisions of how those notifications would come. But part of that school safety task force from the state and at the local level has decided to address that because we've had several people ask us about that. And how quickly, I know the officer that's involved in the chase can't make that notification. So you have to come up with what we call a standardized or a hard copy notification that might go out with a touch of a button. Similar to the code red process that Central has the capability of. If I call out Central and say, code red, report to the station, they push a button and it notifies every officer that works for us. So we might have to come up with, say, code, whatever it is, Jefferson School lockdown, where they push a button and it would automatically call the phone numbers in Jefferson and give them that notification. Or it might say, all city lockdown, and we could push that button and do that. But that's how I envision that would work in the future. But currently it's not operational.
Other questions for Mark?
Just one question on doing some of the traffic violations. I noticed there were a few of them were 40 or 70 or something one year, last year. Then this year there were none. And then there were different charges that inverted. And I didn't really see the corresponding. But do they charge changed or something?
No, you're trying to find a pattern?
Well, from when it went from like an average up to 0 and something else from 0 up. So is it just traffic enforcement pattern changing?
Primarily, yes. There's two things that really affect that. If you do have the enforcement in particular, you see a lot of citations for no insurance. Pretty soon the word starts getting around, don't get caught without insurance. So people do a better job. Same way with speeding in a particular area or OWI enforcement. People say, man, they got a lot of cars out. And so people learn. And the nice thing is if you look at our accident rates, they've gone down in the past 10 years. And that's not all just because of law enforcement. That's because citizens are better drivers. They're paying attention. They're saying, and you know what else? Engineering. I don't know if you were here when we had no left lane in front of McDonald's years ago. When they put that left turn lane in, our accident rate out there went down 63 one year. So I really can't find a rhyme or a reason. One thing I can attribute traffic enforcement to, and that's how busy we are with other calls. And so then that might affect the time that you're out and about and able to observe traffic. So, for instance, it takes something like running a school bus flasher. Some years we'll have 10, and other years we have 0. And I like to attribute to the fact that people are doing a better job because the bus drivers normally call us when they see that sort of thing. But same way that the other ones that fluctuate seem to be fail to stop, sure to clear distance. Oftentimes, whether people slide into the back of others, that's weather dependent. And I'm going to tell you straight up, Councilman, I've been doing this 40 years, and I still can't figure out crime patterns. It's so whimsical, it baffles me oftentimes.
I just wondered if it was us or if it was...
It can be a combination of both.
Yeah.
It can be OWI enforcement goes up and down according to the experience level of the officers working in midnight shift. If I have newer officers, the OWI enforcement generally stays about the same. If I have more veteran officers, it goes up because they're better able to identify the driving methodology of a person who's under the influence. Thank you again.
Thanks, Mark. We are up to public comments once again. you want a public comment, we can.
Hello, Emily Riskin, 3 Report. I actually have a question for you regarding your volunteer program. Do they ride solo? My main question with that is because you mentioned OWI could potentially uptick with marijuana becoming illegal. So I'm just curious, because you mentioned that they work 8 to 4. I would assume that's probably a high time for OWI violations. How would your volunteer program help with that, or are you going to have to adjust your staffing levels when that comes into play?
We generally run our reserve program Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, and that time is generally our higher crime times, and they already adjust according to crime statistics.
Any other public comment? Seeing none, we are up to unfinished business. Any unfinished business? We are up to new business, and we have a handout. Keith?
Thank you, Your Honor. At your table this evening is a contract between the City of Coldwater, the Department of the Attorney General for the State of Michigan, and a third-party appraiser that we're asking you to take action on. This would be in representation of our appeal to the Clemens Food Group and their petition for an appeal for their tax assessment to the Michigan Tax Tribunal. Typically, you wouldn't see these. It's not uncommon for us to enter into an appraisal for the purpose of an appeal, but this one in particular, because of its size, it exceeds my spending authority. It is asking for the approval of between $15,000 and $24,000, and that represents half of what would be split for the total appraisal fee with the state of Michigan. The contract itself is supplied by the state of Michigan, it's been reviewed by the state of Michigan, and you're a party to that.
So Keith, if it's not upheld, if their appeal is upheld, do we still have to pay our defense, or do they have to pay for it?
Yes, we're going to incur the expense of our attorney fees. Yeah.
And is this something we should expect by other large companies in the area?
We've had appeals previously by other commercial entities, but usually the differences aren't so much, and there is a settlement reached, and we move on. But otherwise, at this point, given the size of this particular facility and its relative uniqueness, that's going to drive their desire to submit a petition and appeal their initial valuation that was established in the first year of operation.
Are those numbers public for us right now?
Yes.
How much are they?
So their appeal is for, the assessment is just over $91 million, and their appeal is seeking $60.8 million. $60.8 million. So that would be for, that's for, assessed.
Doesn't the property owner usually submit an appraisal? Isn't it typically them? I don't know if this is like a board review thing or a higher level board review with the state.
They too will have an appraisal as part of their filing with NTT, correct?
Clemens.
Correct.
In general, Keith, a lot of those timelines on those tax things, all those usually take,
So I know the appraisal has to be completed by July 9th, and I forget the date in which I'm looking at Tom or Megan as to recall what the date of the actual hearing is.
Has not yet been set. That notation on the tax tribunal docket, which is available online, just says it's ready to be set for final hearing, ready to be set. I think Deb indicated she thought it would probably be in September. I think that's what I recall.
Yeah. So I guess I'm curious, so what was your prior appraisal last year's?
Well, So this is the first, 2018 would be the first year in which their entire value would be taxed. And so that was the year in which they were, as of December 31st, 2017. So that would encompass the full construction of the facility. And so that would be, the prior years would be a portion of the construction and the value of the land. So
It was the first one,
correct.
whole year one.
And what do we expect it was going to be worth? That's a 30% difference.
So there were estimates along the way, but it was until you get the construction figures. They submit as part of their documentation for their IFT. There's a value that's established through the state IFT. There's a letter that's provided as far as what their construction value was from the company. So that number's not set until we get those values.
And who came up with the 91 million state?
No, so there's a formula by which the city assessor applies that, and so she looks at their construction value, income, market rates, and establishes, there's a formula which she has to follow to establish that. So it's our city assessor who then sets that number.
But there's a formula, plugging in numbers to do that, it's not just.
That's the state's formula. We have to follow.
Correct. Yes, there's a process by which you have to follow to establish that value.
Thank you.
Is part of their argument that they're such a unique building, kind of like dark stores, are they can't be worth that much money because it's such a unique operation? Is that part of their argument?
I think that will be part of their argument. We're not that far down the road yet. This is literally the first step in which that we're taking to appeal their appeal or to counter their appeal.
So they will present data supporting their position. We need to do the same, and we need this information in order to do that.
Correct.
In this contract, 24,000 maximum that we would be on the hook for is to completion of this matter.
For this year, there again, as the contract stipulates too, there's always the chance or opportunity for a taxpayer to then file for subsequent years appeals. So it could be a second round if they were to appeal in the future, depending upon what the outcome of this appeal establishes.
Budget-wise for something like this.
It's within, not that we would have set aside it for this particular purpose, but we have a line item within our budget for contractual legal services above and beyond our in-house attorney fees or expenses. So there are funds available that can be allocated to cover that.
Get rid of that. That's what we need.
Seems like the cost of doing business is unusual, but it's the cost of doing business we need to defend our position as well. And so I move to approve the agreement.
Motion with support. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion is carried. We are up to adjournment unless there's anything else for the good of the council. Thanks, everybody. We are adjourned.